at CICO, we started the Bharat Inclusion Initiative, and it's a program, that was started with the objective of supporting startups that are building solutions for the lower middle income segments of the country. Primarily, our focus has been on fintech skilling, livelihood enabling solutions. We were joined in this, and we are being supported by like-minded partners, which includes the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, JP Morgan, the Omidyar Network, and the MetLife Foundation. Right? And over these years, we've done a variety of activities. And through these activities, we have now we've reached like a few thousand folks in the startup ecosystem, both startup founders, investors, and other ecosystem partners through the thought leadership that we have generated over these years. We have incubated around 5 solutions right from the idea stage. We have accelerated over 30 startups, and we have also invested in a few startups, right? And all the startups that we have, supported through our incubation, acceleration, and through our funding, they've gone on to they've already served over 20 million customers, post their participation in our programs, right? In fact, even currently, we are accepting applications for the Financial Inclusion Lab, the accelerator program that we have for early stage innovations in fintech skilling and livelihood. For these startups, we offer mentoring, market and investor access, field insights from our consulting partner, MSC, and also some capital to help you with as you go along the way. Well, that's a brief introduction about the program. Sanjay, Vijay, and Arjun, pleasure to have you here, and very much looking forward to this discussion. I was just going through, all the social media, the marketing and material and everything that's been up on this discussion. And since I realized that, some interesting comments made, that Bharat is all around us and within us, right? And but at the same time, I guess all of us have our different perspectives on Bharat, and what it is, what it's becoming. And in fact, I'd like to start by getting your views on that. So Vijay, I'd like to start with you. Would love to, get some sort of a landscape from you around Bharat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sandeep, and thanks to you and Vanya for starting this session on a very good note. A very good afternoon to my fellow panelists, Sanjay and Arjun, and to all the few who have joined on this Friday afternoon. So we hope that you leave this session with a few meaningful takeaways and learnings from whatever that we can share. Great. So like Sandeep said, Bharat is definitely, within us and all around us, like no denying that, right? I mean, this is a month where we just had our Independence Day celebration. So, I mean, there is a lot of, obviously emotion, which goes, when we look at Bharat and what is it that lies before us. So I think if one were to clearly look at this, from a fintech lens, right? And if you just take a step back and see where are we, in terms of just sheer numbers, right? Like, so you give or take by next year, we'll have more than 200 million internet active users just from rural India, right? And we all know 70% of our country, is from villages, right? Like, and if you take the micro SME population, more than 80% of the 60 million micro SMEs are from rural India, right? So that shows the power in terms of numbers that rural India has, right? And where have historically been challenges and I would say opportunities, right? At the end of the day, opportunity is only the other side of a challenge. The opportunities have been in terms of how do we increase accessibility, how do we increase financial awareness, how do we reduce transaction costs, right? And how do we improve the infrastructure, the financial infrastructure, right? Those have been the four key areas, right, which have provided opportunities. And a lot has happened on all these fronts, right? Payments infrastructure, financial infrastructure. We have, Sanjay, who's the best place among all of us to talk about it. He'll share his views soon. If you look at sheer accessibility itself, right? Look at what has happened during the pandemic, right? The government was able to transfer several hundreds of crores of benefits directly to accounts. And how was that enabled? I mean, you had that enabling ecosystem in terms of, Jandan, Aadhaar, and mobile, coming together, right, to make that happen. And increasingly, you're seeing more and more digital adoption, right? Like, so, you see adoption of digital banking, you see adoption of Aadhaar-enabled payment systems. You see more and more banking correspondence, spreading across the country. All of this is pushing digitization in a manner which we never thought of, right? And those, to me, are really the macro opportunities that are in front of us, which, for us to take and run with it. And obviously, they will come with challenges, but those are ones that, we can overcome through the many levers that we will have.
Thanks a lot, Vijay. Interesting view there. The 4 A's, right, of accessibility, awareness, the acquisition, and of course adoption. Great. Thanks for laying that out. I'd like to now move to Arjun. Arjun, you've been working with, especially with the rural India. Want to get your view in on, from your experiences of Jai Kisan, especially.
Sure, absolutely. So thanks Sandeep and Vanya for inviting us to this, and Sanjay, Vijay, glad to kind of share this with you guys, and good afternoon, everyone. So I think, how do we define Bharat? We define Bharat as, the entire American continent, right? And the European continent together as large as an opportunity, which is completely unexplored by most mature, sophisticated businesses, and was largely kind of left out by startups as well. Obviously, in the past 2 years, we've seen a significant increase, right, in attention that is provided or given to Bharat, right, which is rural India, according to us. Why is that? Is that because, large companies or startups really want to focus towards Bharat? Maybe not, but it is actually because fundamentally what Bharat holds, right, which is extremely robust growth and fundamentals. Yeah, it is a production-based economy at the end of the day, not consumption-based, and you have a significant number of both supply and demand folks that are in that market. Now, interestingly, this has just been significantly increased over the course of the pandemic. Number one, because the rural Indian previous to the pandemic was using digitization or technology to thrive. Today, they've understood that digitization or technology has to be used to survive. And I think this is a significant change that has taken place over the past 2 years in Bharat or in rural India. Because of which, folks like us here at Jai Kisan or the many other kind of tech companies that are trying to make, some sort of impact or some sort of change in rural markets, job much, much, much easier. We don't have to go out as much today. Folks are actually coming in, right? And because what you've also seen as, pre the pandemic, rural India was just not financially starved. It was also starved of one more very, very important resource, which was human capital, right? Why? Because as a matter of fact, you go to any village, right? What is the dream of every young boy or young girl? To go to Mumbai, to go to Delhi, to go to Bangalore, to go to Chennai, to go to a tier 1 city, live there and work there, right? While if you actually do the math, they end up making lesser money than they do in rural India and spend more money than they do in rural India, right? So what you saw was that all of these folks were in some cases forced to go back because of the various kind of events that were unfolding in urban India, right? Or chose to go back. And then you further saw an increasing rate of digitization because these were folks who were on Facebook, who were using WhatsApp, who knew what digital lending was, who understood what QR code se payment karna is, right? And implement that in their family businesses or rural proprietorships or whatever that may be. right? So just very quickly, I think that's how we define Bharat, as a very, very large unexplored opportunity, as big as the United States and the European continent combined, because our numbers are even more than that, right? And a very, very, very favorable time as we speak today, because of the significant adaptation of digitization across the board. Thanks, Sandeep.
Thanks a lot, Arjun. Wonderful insight there, about the digitally savvy human capital also now moving back, to the rural areas, along with all their aspirations of, probably living a much better life. Sanjay, would like to take it from there and want to get your views in with all this happening. How has the infrastructure, especially the financial infrastructure, been growing, and how has it been adopted?
Sandeep, the last few years have been quite incredible in terms of financial infrastructure. As it is, we have always been, not always, in the last few years, been leading on the digital transactions. In terms of digital payments, we are growing very rapidly. And that growth has continued over the past 2 years. And I wanted to, because of the pandemic, I took 2 years data. I didn't want to, deal with any particular blips in the chart. Still, UPI transactions have grown from 1.5 lakh crores in value terms from July 2019 to 6 lakh crores in value terms in July 2021, 4x in a period of 2 years. The number of transactions is also similar. We are at 3 billion plus transactions the last month. IMPS, which is more useful from the rural or tier 2 India perspective, which is typically being used for a remittance corridor, has seen similar growth. It's about 2x in 2 years. AEPS, which is used in Bharat as an ATM replacement, that's also grown about 2.5 to 3 times in the last 2 years. So from all perspectives, what we have seen is that the consumer in Bharat is becoming more and more connected through financial transactions. And I just want to preface this by saying that most of these transactions, while there's a lot of growth in urban India, there is still a fair amount of growth happening in rural India as well. And particularly if I take into account the AEPS transaction volume or IMPS volume, much of that is rural in nature. And so really what we are seeing is that this consumer base is now adopting digital transactions. On the other hand, from the infrastructure side, NPCI is looking to see how we can enable transactions for smartphone users or for low connectivity situations, as well as for newer use cases. So all of that is eventually going to make it easier and easier to bring them on board into the system. At the same time, there are efforts on to digitize businesses, bring credit to them, both businesses and small farmers. And so, which is really, a rural economy is not just farm, but it's also, like I think Arjun pointed out very well, was that there's a lot of producers out there. And all of them are getting more and more digital because of the way the economy is growing. And so I think the financial infrastructure is improving and access is really being brought in. But in addition to that, we are now starting to see usage as well.
Got it. So Sanjay, what does this in some sense translate into when we are looking at the use cases that have already been in some ways developed? Where are those solutions?
So the primary use case, of course, is payments. That's of course grown quite rapidly. Over and above that, we are starting to see some more in the sense of embedded finance, where we are seeing people, like Khata book kind of examples, where people are digitizing the businesses, but in addition to that, are also looking at seeing how credit can fit into that mix, so that now that you have data about the user, you can start to offer them credit. And so that's one piece that is starting to now go up. Insurance, there is a fairly large felt need, but that uptake has been smaller. I don't think it's been at the level that we would have liked to see. Savings, interestingly, is growing pan-India. So if you take a look at the mutual fund investment scenario, we are seeing a fair number of folks coming, not, I wouldn't say rural, but beyond tier. The way the mutual fund industry has been looking at it was a top 10 cities so far. And then anything beyond the top 10 was considered in the next category. And that is seeing a big growth. So I don't think I have rural data, but we are seeing that go beyond the top 10, 20 cities, the participation in mutual funds in the stock market is growing. So that is kind of an expansion in the right direction. So we are seeing, so payments, credit, insurance, and savings or investments are all starting to see the right kind of growth in this space.
Great. Thanks, Sanjay, for that. Vijay, want to just put the same question to you. You've been working with multiple fintechs, and especially, I guess, many of these fintechs are also more urban Bharat focused. So we want to get your views in on what are the kind of solutions that you've seen and where they are.
So what has clearly happened over a period of time, Sandeep, is that solutions have gone from rural to semi-urban, from urban to semi-urban to rural, right? That expansion has clearly happened, right? That is one. Second, right, like if we were to take some use cases, so that I think with examples, it's easy to relate and see what really is happening. So let's take a few segments, where we have seen significant activity happening on the Bharat side. First, right, if you look at just pure marketplaces, right, take the example of an agri bazaar or a tractor junction and so on. These are startups, what they have come and done is to say that, okay, like the way, I've had my mainstream e-commerce marketplaces, can I have the equivalent of that, whether it is agri commodities or whether it's agri inputs, right? Or, or in terms of, other inputs that the farmer needs, to really, grow his produce, whether it is seeds, pesticides, etc. That's one segment, where clearly, activity has happened. Other segment, if you were to see, there are these market linkages firms, right? Like your classic examples being Ninja Cart or Dehat, which have looked to kind of see, okay, how do I bridge the gap between rural and urban India in terms of taking that produce, which Arjun was talking about, being the production economy, right? It has to get consumed. How do I bridge that gap? How do I disintermediate, right? How do I reduce costs so that, at the end of the day, the farmer can get more from his produce than what he was getting because of the multiple layers of intermediaries, right? So that's the other segment, where a lot of activity, has been happening. Then, if you were to look at it, there are these newer concepts which have been emerging, right? You take precision farming, for example. Historically, what used to happen is people would produce and then figure out a way to have it consumed, right? Like, figure out the supply chain, figure out what's the lowest cost way of getting it to the place where there is demand. The reverse is happening, right? People are figuring out, okay, now there is demand, right, for these specific items, or crops. Now, how do I find a way to backward integrate, right? And firms like Clover Farms or, Future Farms, they're doing really good work there, in that space. Then you take, credit, right? Jai Kisan is a great example. In terms of, how am I able to kind of lend to these farmers? You have a Samunati, you have a Samaru. How do I ensure that, like, even if, let's say, I'm not able to access the credit history of the farmers because he doesn't have any, how can I work around the people whom he interacts with, like whether it be the anchors or the trader community whom the farmer interacts with and has a relationship with them? How can I use them to transmit credit back to the farmer, right? So, and then, you have, startups, coming and saying that, okay, now for the farmer, there is a whole host of activities needed in terms of farm management, right? Right from what kind of produce, I need to do, to which season when I need to do it, to what kind of inputs I need, to real-time data and interesting analytics to ensure that, I do the right set of activities at the right time, right? And to figure out, where is the best place, where I should take these produce to. There is a lot of intelligence coming in, firms like, Cropin and a Gramophone and so on. They're kind of providing these intelligence to farmers to help them get more out of, what they're producing, right? So there is a very interesting, I would say, a series of activities happening in all these segments. If you were to take Bharat, And I gave a few examples, so that, people can relate to it. But you see the number of segments that are cropping up, which is really, helping Bharat prosper. It's actually, quite fascinating.
So Vijay, what about the urban Bharat,
Yeah.
the blue collar workers, the gig workers? How is that shaping up?
Very good question, right? So that is seeing a phenomenal growth. If you look at just the gigization of the workforce, right? Right from, the segments relating to e-commerce delivery, to food delivery, right? I mean, the number of workforce, that is coming there, and also aided by regulation, right? You would recall that, in the most recently, there was unification of the labor codes into 4 large labor codes. And for the first time, people have started talking about benefits for the gig economy. Like it never used to be there. Right? People are talking about benefits for the gig economy, like how mainstream formal workforce gets benefits, right? And that's where we are progressing, right? Saying that, okay, now these are people, who, while, they are paid on a variable basis, they still need basic minimum security, basic minimum social security, that is PF, ESIs, etc., being talked about for gig workers and so on. So that is, that is happening. What is aiding, at the back end, if you see, there is a huge amount of financial infrastructure that is aiding, transactions. So, that is aiding, that is aiding the rapid adoption of this, right? Like, so for along with the fact that, internet has tremendously increased. So if I were to take an example, so, you take a Zomato food delivery person, thanks to the fact that, he has internet on his phone, he is able to do the deliveries. And in cases, also collect payments. You take an e-commerce delivery person, he's now able to flash his phone, flash a QR code and get a payment, right? Which a few years back was still a dream, right? Those kind of enablers are happening, which are rapidly transforming, how workforce and how digitization and how, fintech use cases used to be, right? So those are the kind of changes, which are happening, I would say, in the gig workforce.
Got it. Thanks, Vijay.
Yeah.
Arjun, we'll come to you. I think you made some interesting, points about how things have been. Now, also want to understand, going forward, are there, let's just looking to do some crystal gazing here. How do you think things might evolve, and what are going to be the opportunities that are going to emerge?
Sure. So I think. Sorry. So I think just to kind of quickly add on to what Vijay mentioned as well, right? There's a very, very interesting economy or concepts that are also flowing in from urban to rural, right? In addition, obviously, to the entire agri kind of economy that's there, right? Let's think about a social commerce startup, right? For example, yeah. Or let's think about the Udans of the world, right? People actually don't think Udans rural for some reason, right? But largely whatever I've seen, right, with regards to their operations are mostly tier 2, tier 3 and beyond, yeah, where they're actually being able to enable trade. Now, what does that mean? Yeah, so if we go back to, the heydays of the business correspondent or the banking correspondent, right, at the retail level, yeah, why did the RBI or why did the banks think, hey, it is okay to give this very, very, very small, MSME or individual proprietorship, right, which is running a Kirana store, right, the power of banking? Because at the end of the day, they knew that this particular Kirana store fellow has the best relationships out there in their particular micro geography. They do business with their particular generation, their father did business with their father's generation and things like that, right? So that is just kind of getting to it. So how do you use this Kirana store or this merchant in a way to be able to acquire your consumers or your customers up there, right? I was just reading a great article today in the morning, by Ashneer of Bharat Pay, where he said, hey, why should I pay Google or Facebook, right? Where I can get my merchant to acquire the customer for me. Yeah. So I think the next wave, right, irrespective of which industry is it fintech, is it commerce, is it market linkage, etc., and each you'll have an opportunity, right? It's about how do you kind of use the influencer, right? In urban, we call them the influencer, the Instagram model, or whatever the case may be, right? In rural, this will be the Kirana store or the merchant, right? And how do you go in a B2B2C manner to be able to acquire that customer. Thereby, you will obviously have to provide a value proposition to your merchant partner, right? And a full suite of services to the end customer who's coming to that particular merchant partner, right? And Sanjay, very much aligned with your comment around Khatamukh, for example, as well, right? Yeah, again, B2B2C, merchant, and then kind of understanding from there. So I think that is, one landscape that we are super excited about. And number two, with regards to fintech, right? I mean, most fintech players will start doing. Yeah, this may be embedded in some format, it may be partnered in some format, it may be running their own book in some format, whatever the case is. But it'll be an additive number of services that are coming into the product suite, right? So even if someone's starting off with payments, they will expand into lending, they may expand into insurance, they may expand into savings, but there is a route to monetization, right? So we just need to kind of look at the bigger folks, right? And say, hey, a startup which is kind of, let's say 3, 4, 5 years old has kind of understood the learnings and now is on its path to monetization. What are they starting to do? Right? And lastly, I think, this completely unexplored opportunity is sitting also in savings, right, Sanjay? And I think you must have seen a lot of that over the past 1 year, right? While the data is very, very tough to kind of consume, what you see is that democratization of finance is taking place, right? It can be in the world of the NFTs, right? Monkeys eating pizzas, which are selling for millions of dollars, or it can be a Rashida who's sitting in, Nilgiri Hills, right? Being able to buy a piece of an ETF, right? Is that something that we are being, enabling these customers to do as the next step is the question, right? There are fantastic apps like ChangeJar, right? I was speaking to Nishchay yesterday and built a beautiful product, right, around being able to provide savings, 4 months old, significant amount of traction, right? How do you kind of, build products which are something that the user needs, right? Facilitate it to them in an easier manner, right? And to be able to kind of capture an extremely unexplored opportunity, right? While making sure that there's a macro trend on it, it's happening somewhere in urban India, and then you get it relative or relatability towards your rural counterparts. Right? So, just to kind of quickly summarize, believe that B2B2C is the way to go. Merchants, fintech, you will expand product suite to be able to monetize. And then within fintech, there's this sleeping beauty called savings, right? Which is very, very unexplored, lots of things to do. And I think a great opportunity for folks to be able to kind of look at and start understanding as well.
Okay, thanks a lot, Arjun. Love that summary. And I really hope that some of the startups on, who are on this call are listening to some of these insights. Vijay, will come to you with the same question. How do you see things? I mean, especially want to get your view on, the more urban kind of solutions.
Yeah. I see two things, playing out in a significant fashion over the next 5 to 10 years, Sandeep, right? And I think, in some sense, if people would have listened to this fund called Andreessen Horowitz, right? And Angela Strange, she made this comment, where saying that in the future, every brand will be a fintech brand. Every company will be a fintech company, right? And it was one of the most talked about, listened to speeches, right? I mean, you can check it out on YouTube. And there is a reason why she made that comment, right? And you will see it everywhere happening, right? So if you look at companies, which own the customer, right? Historically, companies, which brick and mortar or digital, which own the customer, they want to provide financial services to these same customers without going the traditional route that a typical financial services company took, right? So simply put, let's say if I am a Walmart, right, or I'm say a Reliance Retail, and I want to provide meaningful products to my customers, which means that, I want to give them credit products. I want to give them, say, insurance products, savings products, etc. I want to give them payment solutions. I do not want to do the full rigmarole of, taking, many months, sometimes years of, working with banks and, putting together the infrastructure and building it, everything. I want something, which is API driven, right? So, I would say the API banking driven revolution is something that's here to stay, right? And if you look at, the likes of Zeta. I mean, and that's what, they're really heralding, right? The future is banking as a service, and it's playing out pretty much, across the world. It has started playing out in India, and in my mind, that's where, we are heading, right? Where people want to embed finance, right? And today you open a Swiggy app, like a year before there was nothing called Swiggy Money. You see Swiggy Money. Why is it? Because you want to embed financial services offerings to your customer base, right? In an easy manner, in a pay as you use kind of a manner, right? In a manner, which is just, plug and play. And that's what, more and more brands will do. And that opens significant opportunities, for companies which have the ability, to work with banks to kind of, figure out, the different layers, and to kind of sachetize this in terms of smaller offerings, right? And that's where, Arjun's example becomes very valid. If someone, wants to buy a small portion of a fund, you need to sachetize that offering, right? Whether it is an investment offering, whether it is an insurance offering, whether it's a savings offering, you need to be able to provide to them in a manner which they can consume, right? And if and historical traditional financial legacy firms cannot do it. New age firms, which are riding on, API banking, which kind of approach this, from a fresh perspective, right? Which are saying that, okay, hey, I will be the bridge, right? Hey, you fintech, you don't need to work, from scratch, to offer these products to the bank. You focus on your customer acquisition, right? I will work with the bank, which anyway has the licenses and regulation, right? And I will offer these products to you in a digitized manner, in a manner where you can easily integrate with the right APIs, and then you offer it to your customers. And that is what will increasingly happen more and more over the next 5 to 10 years.
Got it. Thanks, Vijay. Interesting. And APIization and sachetization. Right?
Yeah.
Interesting point. So Sanjay, I'm sure you'd have your view on this. And you've been seeing solutions, both urban, rural, right, for different segments. Very much interested in, understanding what are the kind of opportunities that you think will open up going forward.
I think both Vijay and Arjun said this fairly well, that, what we are seeing is businesses that are going in there and who are going to offer financial services in addition to what they already have. Because clearly there is a massive cost to customer acquisition and servicing. And if you already acquired the customer and are servicing them through one channel, you would add more to that. And broadly, if you think in terms of finance itself, right, finance is always a secondary function. People look at credit and savings as ways to even out cash flows. I have more money today, I'll save it. If I have less money, I want to borrow it, right? So that I can make my life smoother than what it is. And that's really why it makes sense for it to be a part of other functions that you're already doing. And so from that perspective, I do think that we will see businesses that are going out offering services, whether it is agri or to manufacturers or to small producers in these areas, or whether it is social commerce, healthcare. All of these folks will be adding more financial functions into there so that those customers, their basic needs and their financial needs can both be met in the same place. And that will then allow users to just lead more productive lives. And so adoption will be much easier. So I do think that in the next few years, this market will be sort of taken over or serviced really through financial products that are embedded into other things which they want to do anyway. The market is really full of people who are very aspirational, who are seeing what's happening in tier 1, tier 2 India, and they're looking to see why can't their lives be improved where they are without having to migrate. And that's when, all of these services will start to become a part of it. And I think we will see that happen. I think on the agri side, we already covered the two. The agri input side is one piece, and then the farm to fork is the other side. And both of those chains are becoming more and more digital and more integrated with the end customer. And I think we will continue to see that happen. And finally, the one thing that the pandemic has highlighted is insurance and healthcare. And I think while it's, there's still questions around the costing and so on of it, but I do think that the need awareness has come up in the consumer. And now, it's up to the companies to find how to meet those needs in a reasonable manner. So I do think that's a massive opportunity waiting for us, where the customer is already aware of what they need. It's just a question of now converting it into a product that works. So I do think we will see that happen. And so I think the space is wide open. There's a large customer population out there with unmet needs, and and we are now in a position to be able to meet them. The infrastructure is there, the products are there, the green shoots of services into the spaces are there, and now it's, I think, the right time to build for this.
Okay, thanks, Sanjay, for that. We will be moving to Q&A, so request the audience, please type in your questions. But before we, as folks are just typing in their questions there for us, I have one question. I think either of you can probably look at it. Going forward, I mean, if you have to see one challenge being solved, maybe either by a banks or the government, anything. I mean, one thing that you want, them to solve, then what would that be? Something which can really, kickstart the next round of expansion of finance.
I would really pick financial awareness and literacy, Sandeep, right? Because at the end of the day, right, I mean, for the consuming population to access this product, they first need to be aware of the need, right? If there is no aware of the need, and if there is widespread ignorance, there is not going to be a movement towards adopting the product, right? So to me, the fundamental thing is in terms of, really building awareness and literacy, and that is a collective effort, right? There is no, it is a collective effort by all the institutions, including the government, right? It's in terms of, really building that. Because see, I'll tell you, one of the key things, which are important for a sound economy is the ability to allow the large portion of its population to not fall into a debt trap, right? Today, I mean, and all of us are aware, right? I mean, at the rural India, at the real base, people borrow, from money lenders at like phenomenally high rates, right? And it's a vicious cycle that a lot of them are trapped in. With some real simple habits, in terms of saving and discipline, can correct it. And then, that has a cascading effect, as it ripples across through the economy, right? So I really feel, that is one, one area, which really is something. And obviously it's a long-term effort, right? Like it's not a switch which you can just flip on and off. It's a journey. But it's a journey which, corporates, all institutions, all banks, it's a collective journey which people have to take.
Got it. Thanks, Vijay.
Yeah.
Arjun, anything?
From I think very deeply the PSL framework, right? Significant amount of capital that is very, very inefficiently spent today, right? And if in addition to just plain vanilla regional rural banks and cooperative banks, etc., if they're able to work with fintechs or service providers to be able to enable embedded finance, right? I think everyone will be able to achieve their mission quicker, which is of being able to get capital into the folks who need it most hands, number one. Number two, not having to unnecessarily find banks and make banks build a business that they don't really want to build either, right? So I think just kind of reworking the entire PSL framework would be very helpful for the entire financial inclusion, which is what it was.
Thanks, Arjun, for that. Sanjay?
So I think in terms of what I would expect to see as a challenge to be countered is really local language. I think one of our comments in today is also about being able to have this conversation in a language which everybody can understand and relate to. And I think that's going to be one of the big challenges. And I don't necessarily think it's a government thing. I think it is really, the tech industry rising up to meet the challenge where we have more speakers in most of our languages than, if you take a look at internationalization, people go to European languages are even much smaller population base, but they don't support Indian languages, which have a larger number of users. And that really comes down to where the tech is not yet at a level where that would work. And I think that's something which needs to be solved because people need to be able to interact with systems in their own languages, in their own way of working and so on. So I think user interfaces and languages is one big challenge that I would think will have to be done. The second, I think people are still in a do it for me mode, and we have to, I think that is a confidence building step where you have to go through from where it goes to do it yourself. And again, I think that's a step we'll have to overcome in the next few years, where people will become more and more comfortable with technology and being able to deal with it. But then the underlying piece that is unresolved, which is where maybe a regulator or somebody needs to step in, is dispute resolution. What happens when something goes wrong? And those are the pieces which will eventually give people the comfort to go purely digital and being able to transact at a distance. So I think that's something which I would expect to see from a systemic perspective, these problems to be solved. Doesn't matter who solves them, for I think this economy to take off.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sanjay. Thank you, everyone, Arjun, Vijay, and Sanjay for having this discussion.
Sure.
Vanya, over to you for the Q&A.
Hey, yeah, I'll just read it out. There are quite a few questions here. So somebody is asking Arjun to repeat the name of the company which has built the product around saving. So if Arjun, you can repeat that or maybe type it out on chat.
Sure, JAR. JRR.
JRR, JAR. All right. Then the Bendu is asking, are there any recent payment solutions using feature phones?
Yeah, I just
I think
quickly
Vijay
responded
has-
to that. Yeah.
I think someone's already responded.
Right. So Nishant says we're seeing, sorry, somebody was saying something.
Sanjay, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say that last year with NPCI, we launched a grand challenge on feature phone payments. And there were 3 companies that we had selected as winners, and we are working with them to enable this. So you've already mentioned Missed Call Pay and Don't Tag. The third company is Gupshup. And all 3 of them are working with NPCI to enable more feature phone payments across the country. NPCI also launched a solution with eRoute Technologies earlier this year. So I think there's a lot of efforts going on to solve this problem, and it's great to see it happen.
Thank you, Sanjay. So Nishant's asking, he's saying, we're seeing a lot of startups like Khatabook, which are making bookkeeping easier for Bharat. However, these are analogous to what wallet is in the payments ecosystem used to be. So, and UPI changed the landscape, making wallet companies like Paytm kind of obsolete. So is something like a UPI around the corner when it comes to bookkeeping as well?
Yeah, I can take that. So that's a good question, Nishant, right? And that's an interesting analogy you're making. The key thing I would highlight is that if you were to take payment companies itself, right? Wallet was an entry point, right? Wallet was their first offering to acquire millions of users. And for those millions of users, they went on to add a slew of other product offerings to them. Right? So if you look at today, any payment provider, if you look at the slew of offerings they have, right, from recharges to bill payments to insurances to investment options and so on, that is the way you expand your product offering. So if I were to now extend this on the merchant side, right, on the SME side or the micro SME side where Khatabook plays, a Khata is an entry point, right? It is everyday use case, right? Because I need a Khata to keep account of what I do in terms of debits and credits. And historically, it was pen and paper. I couldn't track. I had no real dashboards. I had no intelligence. So this gives me a way to do that. But trust me, that is only the starting point. With a few million users who are on it, the clear evolution in it is to say that, okay, now with those transactions, can I intelligently know that, okay, what is the kind of business that the merchant is doing, and be able to offer credit to him, even if he is not credit worthy, right? I think Sanjay also briefly touched upon it. The idea is to extend Khata offerings to credit from credit, you can extend it. In fact, you can go the whole hog in terms of providing a complete neo-banking suite to the merchants, right? Where I take care of first accounting transactions, invoicing, credit, I look at, payment transfers, right? All of it building on the Khata, right? So that kind of, gives you the big picture in terms of what the long-term play is.
I think just to quickly add on that, Vijay, Nishant, also I would say that, the UPI version for a Khata or the end use of Khata, which would basically be lending, would be the combo of OCEN and A8, right? Which will kind of democratize lending altogether through any sort of transactional applications. It can be a Khata platform, it can be, a market linkage platform, whatever the case is, right? But that's yet to be seen. Obviously, kind of got a little bit delayed because of the pandemic, but at least that's what lenders are largely thinking about as the next sort of UPI.
That's a great point, Arjun. Yeah.
Great. So next we have Mayur, and he says, I have an app called Kamyab, which helps freelancers and buyers to get together and collaborate. We needed Paytm for our payment gateway, but they declined, saying that banks don't understand a new kind of business models. Is India still limited in its understanding of new business models? If yes, how do we change it?
So maybe I can respond to that. So broadly, Mayur, the point is that any payment provider who is getting into the midst of a payment needs to understand the transaction. And this comes from a risk management perspective, because finally, end of the day, if there is any issue with the payment, the regulatory ecosystem holds the payment service provider to be one of the entities which must protect the customer in this case. And so it's very important that any payment gateway, when they're signing up somebody, understand the source of the money, the destination of the money, and why the transaction is happening. So to that extent, it is a responsibility of that payment provider. And so if you are providing this service, then I do think that you could work with your payment gateway or bank to help them understand what your model is and how they can manage these regulatory compliances and risks. And so I think in that sense, what does happen is that unfortunately the payment gateways don't have enough time to deal with smaller players and end up brushing you off. But perhaps you can find a payment gateway who will understand your model and do it. So I don't think there's a broad brush problem here, but if you're able to articulate why there is what payments are going through the system and why they are legitimate, allowed, I think you should be able to get a bank that will support you.
Thank you, Sanjay. I think the next question is also somewhat similar. It's by Anand, and he said, I started to build a platform to provide small traders to catalog their product and collect link-based payment before pandemic started. However, I was not able to go to the next level as the challenge from Paytm and GPay, and I was not able to get integration from them easily in my app, especially from GPay. I want to know if CII or UPI is working to provide the API for open market, like how the other payment gateways provide, as if we use third-party payment gateway, then their charges are like 1%, to which which really the small traders will not like to pay when the customer can pay directly to them. So however, the records will not maintain.
So I think logically, if anybody is providing a service, they will expect to get some fair compensation for that service, right? I mean, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it is a payment provider or a trader or a platform. I mean, they all will, want to have some incentive to provide the service and to do a good job of it. So in that sense, I don't know if 1% is too much or too little. I don't want to comment on that. But my point is that you would expect to find somebody only if they have a right incentive to do it. And that's something which I'm sure everybody who's in the business world appreciates. And so that's one piece. But I think I'm not able to understand generally in terms of UPI, one should be able to get money directly into people's banks accounts if they have a UPI address. And I mean, you're sort of providing a direct payment link is not a challenge from that perspective. If you need a payment gateway to come in where the money goes into an escrow and gets transferred after a, whatever period of time, then I think that's where you will see challenges. But if you're just enabling people to pay directly to the provider of the goods or services, as long as you're not in the path of that payment, you should be okay. There should be no problem with that. But I think what you're saying is you want to be in the middle of that only because that's the way you will get information on the transaction. Is that what is being meant thing here, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a challenge then, because if the payment is going outside the system directly from one to the other, then you will not see it. And that would be an issue. But then the solution for that is a payment gateway, right?
Absolutely. So Srinidhi has a question. Says that in what ways can fintech products be customized, cater to customers who have lower levels of digital or financial literacy?
So I can take that. Yeah. So I think it's an evolved question in the sense that there are multiple perspectives to it, right? But the clear thing is to look at the product and see, am I squarely attacking what the person's need is, right? So the question takes into account the fact that one, literacy needs to improve. Second, once it improves, get to a point where the product can easily be consumed, right? And it's in a form and shape that it can be consumed. Right. So the idea is to simultaneously engage with the user in a way that, and you can do that either through gamification or through making the UI and the UX extremely simple and customer friendly, or making sure that as the customer is experiencing, you kind of take him up step by step. There are multiple answers to it, right? But the real thing is to really go customer backwards. So a lot of companies, what they try to do, they build something and then they try to figure out which customer segment I should go to, etc., etc. But if you really start customer backwards and say, okay, what is it that this customer really wants, and how can I provide for him in a form and shape that they can use, then the answers start coming, right? And like I said, the question can actually be gone to a lot of depth, but in the interest of time, I'll keep it at a high level. The summary answer to that, I would say, is to go customer backwards, Srinidhi.
Absolutely. So we have a question from Shiva. He says, how do we standardize the APIs between all the parties, as it's so difficult to integrate for fintech with different banks, financial institutions based on their individual requirements?
Arjun,
that's $1 million question, right? Or $1 million answer. I think everyone's trying to figure it out yet. Probably the only seamless way to be able to do it is one hack, right? It's just kind of figuring out hacks. Yeah. So multiple banks use similar LOS or LMSs, right? So try to figure out, your strategy is XYZ. 4 banks are, working on your strategy. Out of those 4 banks, 3 banks are using one LOS LMS. Straightforward to be able to integrate with them, right? But otherwise, as Vijay was mentioning, right, like your entire tech stack should be built in an SDK structure, right? So that irrespective, it can kind of integrate with the supply side or demand side, whatever that may be. Again, depending on the service you're providing. But definitely an incomplete answer, and I take responsibility of that, because I think all of us are in the midst of figuring out as to how do you standardize that or make that APIization happen, as which I was mentioning as well.
Yeah. And just to add to that, what Arjun is saying, one way to kind of attack that is to work with some of the banking as a service players, if you can, right? Like where, because to a large extent they have figured this out. The likes of your Zetas, Decentros of the world, they kind of figured it out. Which means that if you work with them, you save yourself a lot of time, effort, and overhead. But that's just one part of the answer.
Yeah, I was going to say that the whole Open API promise is exactly this, is that at least one aspect of the banking interfaces will become standard and you will be able to integrate with that. And so that's on the front end, which is where the account aggregator and so on are playing. But then, companies like Setu, and you mentioned, I think, Decentro and Zeta are providing certain other services. And that's really their value proposition, right? Is to say that they will make it easier for you to integrate with multiple backend service providers. And that really is the banking as a service game. And I think Open also sits in that category. So each of these provides specific category of integration. The one that Arjun mentioned, I don't think I've seen anybody in the LOS LMS space do that yet. And for lending, that's always a challenge. So I think, yeah, but I'll give you the flip side of the argument. If everybody is standardized, there's no innovation. And you want things to move ahead. So there's always going to be this flux between innovating and going ahead and standardizing and staying put. So I don't think there's going to be ever a single answer to this problem.
But I think we've got good perspectives on it. Next question, I think I won't take much of your time. I know we've already exceeded 5. But there's a question from Sunil. He says, in the last 2 years, banks, lenders basically have shown hesitation, which has made fintech's innovations a bit tougher. How did it impact any one of you, or how can a startup still move ahead or go on to its journey?
Sure, I can take that. I guess, build your own balance sheet, right, at the same time. And obviously, initially cater to how the FI or the lender thinks. And at the end of the day, right, I think a lot of us want to bring in a lot of radical innovation. But what we always forget is that, hey, they're a bank for a particular reason, right? And they've gotten something obviously right. And at the end of the day, in the business of lending, it's actually, the ability to be able to bring the money back, which they've seen cycle over cycle, right? So learning from that is a great kind of mode that you can build. But going forward, obviously, to be able to better the products that you're getting to your customers' hands, and also to be able to make the UI, UX, and the customer experience significantly more seamless, right? You would have to kind of build some balance sheet of your own, which most fintech lending players are doing so today.
Absolutely. So maybe we'll take one last question and then we'll close for the day, because there are a couple of more questions. So I'm not sure how much time we have, but Parth says that is escrow account useful small agriculture processing company, because there is clear trust deficit in buyer and seller. That's why middleman economy flourished, because middleman is responsible for collection of money. So I'm not sure if that's a question or a comment, but
I think it's more of a comment, at least, because see, the whole point of, we talk about disintermediation is a good thing, but what is being disintermediated also was a source of trust. And the point is to find that right balance, I guess.
Definitely. So we'll promise this is the last one. Ashwini says, I'm developing a mobile banking SaaS platform named Rubis for cooperative credit societies. I'm also facing similar problems for arranging digital payments. I have approached more than 15 or 5 or 6 gateway, but most are not interested. That we requested the payments to go directly from customers to society and vice versa to avoid any complications regarding payment aggregation. Do you have any suggestions?
I think that it's related to the payment gateway question, which Sanjay addressed, in a few minutes back. I think, if you're looking at talking to gateways, which are not willing to work with, I think one is to kind of revalidate the assumption that you need a gateway for your model, and there is a certain value in that. Second, to look at now there are a lot more tier 2, tier 3 gateways, which are coming up, right? And in fact, I see some of them even participating in this conference. The idea would be to work with some of them, which can kind of adapt and customize to your needs. But like I said, it is a question of exploring and figuring out the right partner which will work for you, and therein lies the answer.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vijay, for answering that. And thank you to all the speakers, Arjun, Sanjay, Vijay, and Sandeep, for wonderfully moderating the session and for patiently answering all the questions. I'm sure all of us are taking back something and a lot of food for thought as well. So thank you so much for joining in. I hope everybody enjoyed this session. And like I previously also mentioned, that I do see a lot of fintech startups here. So do check out the Financial Inclusion Lab and apply. We have a few days left. So do check it out and apply there. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day and a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks to you too, Vanya, and thanks all of you for joining in. Thanks to Sandeep for moderating this so well, and it's been a real pleasure, sharing the stage with Sanjay and Arjun, both of you. So I really enjoyed this session. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Sanjay. Thanks, Sanjay.